Hi everybody, it's Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au bringing you my regular weekly feature at this time every week, Hotspot of the Week. And tonight I'm going to do something a little bit different because essentially what hotspotting does in pretty much everything it does is to identify the future hotspots, the areas that we think are going to show superior growth, outperform the general market ahead of the growth. But tonight I'm actually going to focus on an area that's already had substantial growth and is almost certainly past its peak of this cycle, but for various reasons I think it's a market that's worth talking about for various reasons. And it's going to be a long-term performer and one that I think illustrates some of the things that are important happening in the market right now. And the area I'm going to focus on tonight is the Central Coast area of New South Wales. Now, as everybody knows, Sydney market is no longer booming after 5 strong years. It's wound down. There is evidence in some parts of the Sydney market that prices are falling a little, although one area of the market that's still holding up strongly where prices are still rising is the first home buyer market. First home buyer activity across Australia is at a higher level than it's been any time in the last 6 years. Certainly loans to first home buyers are at the highest level since 2012. And the locations where most of the activity is happening is actually in New South Wales and Victoria. A little bit ironically because these are the most expensive markets in Australia, but because there's a high level of government incentive and assistance in those two states, we're seeing on the fringe areas of both Sydney and Melbourne and outside of Sydney and Melbourne, some of the regional areas close to the capital cities have got a very high level of activity of first home buyers, and prices in the cheaper areas of Sydney are still rising. The cheaper areas of Melbourne prices are still rising, contrary to what you're reading in the media about prices falling everywhere. That's not true. These parts of the markets in our 2 biggest cities are still strong. Now that kind of buying activity is spilling out over into regional areas close to the biggest cities, and Central Coast is a case in point. So I thought it was worth talking about. A very interesting market, halfway between Sydney and Newcastle, well connected to Sydney by road and rail links. Lots going on there, more affordable than Sydney, and so it's a market to take note of. So we construct our location reports on the Hotspotting website in a particular fashion. They all follow a particular format, which we think is logical and presents information in an easily digestible way. After the introductory page, we have a focus on the economy and amenities of the region. In the case of the Central Coast, the first thing to note is that the Central Coast Council area, the local government area known as Central Coast, used to be Gosford City and Wyong Shire. They amalgamated a couple of years ago to form the Central Coast local government area, which is approximately 95 to 125 kilometres north of Sydney. Very vibrant economy. Increasingly, the health and education sectors are important. The single biggest sector in terms of providing jobs in the Central Coast local government areas, healthcare and social assistance. The 2 major hospitals, the ones at Gosford and Wyong, they're both undergoing major redevelopments. There's also quite a strong educational presence. The Ourimbah University campus, which is in a partnership with Newcastle University, is a multi-sector campus, offers university, TAFE and community college programs. There's also TAFE colleges at Gosford and Wyong. Some big retail facilities there. The Erin Affair Shopping Centre is one of the largest regional shopping centres in Australia. So quite a diverse economy there. A large presence also of government administration, and we recently had the Australian Tax Office establishing a bigger presence there, bringing 600 employees to Gosford. So that sort of thing has a major impact on real estate markets when that happens. The population is expected to continue to grow. Right now, as at the 2016 census anyway, the population of this local government area was 327,000, and it's projected that within 2 decades, it's going to rise to 415,000. So there's a major influx of people expected to come into this area in the next 20 years. And partly it's going to be people who are looking for a different lifestyle to Sydney, or more affordable dwellings and a more affordable lifestyle generally than Sydney. A very strong retirement presence. The percentage of the population that's aged over 50 on the Central Coast is 41% compared to the national average of 31%. So it's a place that people, people like to go when they get a little bit older to retire, for understandable reasons. Lots of beautiful water-based environments in that part of Australia, and it's more affordable, more relaxed than Sydney, but very, very well connected to Sydney for the people who still feel the need to get there from time to time. Several state government departments are domiciled within the region, and we had that recent relocation of 600 ATO employees. Gosford also has the head office of the New South Wales Work Cover Authority in long service leave. Major industrial estates at Summersby and West Gosford. Woolworths has one of its largest distribution centres for New South Wales at Warnervale, which is part of the Central Coast area. New South Wales Police Assistance Line has a call centre there, so does ING Bank have its main call centre for Australia in this area. So why am I talking about all these things? Because what this all means is jobs. There's lots of jobs, and there are major jobs nodes. And very important factor for real estate markets is proximity to where people work. So a certain percentage of the population of the Central Coast leaves the Central Coast to go to work. Presumably most of them go to Sydney to work, but increasingly people living in this area will be working in this area because they're very, very significant jobs nodes, which I've just outlined. So all of that feeds the property market, and the property market's interesting in a number of different respects. Firstly, the relative affordability of it compared to Sydney just down the road. You can search right across the Sydney metropolitan area, more than 700 suburbs, and you're not going to find anywhere that's got a median price for houses below 500,000. But on the Central Coast, there are some suburbs where the median prices are in the mid 400,000s, and then there's a greater number where suburbs and locations that have median house prices somewhere in the 500,000s, places like Gorokan, Blue Haven, Berkeley Vale, Gwendolyn and Turkley. So you're also going to be hard pressed to find any suburbs of Sydney with median prices that low, but there are plenty of them to be found in the Central Coast area. So that's a major factor driving this market. Then you've got also numerous suburbs where the median house prices are in the 600,000, like Baddo Bay, Hamlin Terrace, Killarney Vale, Narara, Springfield, Tumbiumbi and Wyoming. Now there's been, as I mentioned earlier, already substantial price growth in this area. This area caught the wave from Sydney partway through the Sydney boom, and so they've had a couple of years of really strong price growth. And I've got in front of me a page that lists all the major suburbs of the Central Coast, and most of them in the last 12 months have had double-digit growth in their median house prices, including Kincumber. The median house price in the last 12 months has risen 17%. San Remo, the median house price has risen 19%, but still is below 500,000. And Wamberal, one of the probably the most expensive location on the Central Coast, with median house price above $1 million, following growth of 22% in the last 12 months, according to CoreLogic figures. So after a couple of years of really strong growth, partly because of the ripple effect from the Sydney boom, most of the suburbs of the Central Coast have very good long-term growth averages. So what we look at is the average annual growth in median house prices over the last 10 years, and several locations throughout the Central Coast have long-term growth averages of 8% per year. Now, That's a strong growth rate by anyone's standards. I suppose the best you currently would find in Sydney and Melbourne right now, after several years of strong price growth, would be sort of 10-11% per year. But for a regional area outside of the capital cities to be averaging 8% a year, and others of 7% a year, is a strong performance. And I'm expecting this area to continue to show growth because of its linkages to Sydney, because of its lifestyle, and because of the growing proliferation of major jobs nodes in the area. Despite the price growth, yields are still fairly strong. Certainly compared to Sydney, they're very strong. The number of suburbs with median rental yields between sort of 4.0% and 4.3%, and others slightly below 4%. There's a growing apartment market in the area. Gosford itself has got quite a large number of apartment sales in the last 12 months. Median price $450,000. Long Jetty, slightly smaller apartment market, median price $440,000 after strong growth in the last 12 months. But one of the biggest markets and one of the most expensive markets, with the biggest growth in the last 12 months, is Terrigal, where there's been 14% growth in the median apartment price in the last 12 months. It's now over $800,000 for a typical apartment in that area. And some of those suburbs like Gosford, median rental yields about 4.5%. So that's another possibility. Vacancy rates in pretty much all of the postcodes throughout the Central Coast local government area, the vacancy rates are well below 3%, and several of them are below 1.5%. So quite a tight rental market. There's only one postcode, according to the list I have here in our Central Coast location report, where the vacancy rate is currently above 3%. And that's the postcode that includes Terrigal. In terms of future prospects, the Central Coast is just expected to keep on growing its population, with people sort of migrating out of Sydney, seeking a different lifestyle or a greater level of affordability. A lot of development happening in this area. In 2016, the Central Coast Council's approved developments worth $700 million, and then last year, developments worth $800 million were approved by the Central Coast Council. Gosford increasingly is being seen as the region's capital and centre for government administration, civic and commercial services. There is a state government plan called the Central Coast Regional Plan, 2036. So there's long-term planning allegedly happening, underpinning the growth in this area. And this plan estimates that over 40,000 new dwellings are going to be needed in the Central Coast area within 20 years to house the projected population growth. There's also strategic centres planned in locations such as Wyong, Tuggerah, Erina and Woy Woy as part of that state government plan for this area. Now, one of the biggest things happening in the future planning of the Central Coast is the Warnervale town centre, and that's going to include thousands of residents, shopping centre, university campus, sports and recreational precinct, transport interchange, and a business park. And that's a very, very big long-term development. There's quite a bit coming up in the way of development. Gosford Hospital redevelopment under construction, $350 million project. Also under construction is a redevelopment of Wyong Hospital, $200 million development. There's also a proposed Central Coast Medical School and Medical Research Institute. That's a $75 million project. And there's a whole lot of residential development, some of them pretty big, which is not surprising because this area is projected to have pretty substantial population growth as we move forward, with a big chunk of it people migrating out of Sydney. So the Central Coast, a market to take note of. It's already had substantial growth. By our reckoning, it's actually past the peak of this cycle, but long term, it's going to be a place that's going to just keep on growing its population, It's going to keep on growing its infrastructure, and jobs are coming into that area, as I've articulated, and all of that's a strong underpinning for the future property market and property values in the Central Coast area. If you'd like to learn a little bit more, read more in detail, you can go to the hotspotting.com.au website and get that report, the Central Coast Local Government Area Location Report, on the Location Reports page, or for any other region for which we have a report. We only have reports on the areas that we rate and tend to think are going to be the hotspots of the future, plus a couple of other special reports on areas where people have a particular interest because they own real estate there and probably wish they didn't, such as Gladstone in Queensland. Okay, that's it for now. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting signing off. See you again same time next Tuesday evening for Hotspot of the Week, and also keep in mind that in the middle of next week, on Wednesday night next week, is going to be my monthly live Q&A, your opportunity to throw questions at me about anything to do with residential real estate in Australia. But most probably, if you're like most people, you'll want to ask questions about location. Okay, signing off. That's it for now. Terry Ryder. Talk to you again soon.